Good afternoon, good evening rather. Look, already getting it right. It's gone 8 o'clock and I'm calling it the afternoon. But thank you for joining me for a very late episode of the Double Pivot Pod, where Shane looks a lot different and will probably sound a lot different today because it's not Shane, it is Roberto from FPL Yellow Army fame, but not just from that fame. He is the reigning FPL Juice award winner from the I've forgotten what it's called now, but it's their
Content Creator Fund.
There we are, Content Creator Fund. He's won it. He was the bridesmaid. He was the Leonardo DiCaprio after, I think, 85 nominations. They have achieved it. So, no, congratulations, Roberto. You know you had our support for a number of those and well-deserved. So,
thank you, mate.
But welcome and thank you for joining me at short notice to talk about this double game week that we have in front of us. And also good timing with that not being the only thing that we can talk about today.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a big kind of praise about this game week. There already was going into it because obviously, you know, first double of the season, you always want to get this right. But a big announcement on Friday afternoon. And yeah, it's messed up a lot of people's teams. But I suppose the great phrase is where there is chaos, there is opportunity.
There is. And look, anyone that's listened or watched us before, I'm not very good half the time, but I like to see where there are those opportunities to go after. So what we tend to do is kind of just, look at these games, see if there is anything that maybe we notice, whether that's that we've seen or any of the matchups and the data shows. And we'll have a little bit of chat about those things. So look, Roberto, if it's good with you, I think we'll jump into today's presentation. That's not the right button, so we'll try again. And that one is. So here we go. We are on game week 24. And we'll start off actually with your team, Roberto. So, I've obviously listened into your podcast this week, so I've heard you talk through your team, and there's some good scores in there and a good overall score. But why don't you sum up for our listeners how game week 23 went for you?
Yeah, sure thing. Game week 23 was a nice green arrow for me, third in a row, which is the first time I've done that this season. So it feels like, these last few weeks I've kind of gained a bit of momentum, which is very welcome. It's been a very kind of up and down season, quite hard to kind of get any sort of rhythm. So yeah, really nice. I made one transfer of Jackson to Gakpo, which obviously was lovely when Gakpo got the 16-pointer. And Jackson, obviously got a return, but I was very pleased with that overall net gain. And I mean, the defense, look, not great when Henderson conceded and got booked. I mean, it was the fact that penalty from Mbeumo got retaken was very, very frustrating. But Henderson's been good for me, so I'm not going to complain. And he's got me quite a few clean sheets. And then the defense, a bit disappointing, to be honest. I didn't expect Newcastle to concede against Southampton. And I thought that Saliba would be out for Arsenal. So that's why I benched Timber, because I thought, well, Wolves might score a 1 or 2 with Cunha in that attack. So frustrating with Arteta's antics again. But I ended up benching Timber for his 5 points. But at least Trent got that attacking return. It could have been so much more though without that clean sheet in the end against Ipswich. It was a real painful one, wasn't it, against Ipswich Town?
Wasn't that painful for me as someone who doesn't own Liverpool defence? It was one of those that you're kind of hoping for. But no, I think as you discussed, some pain, some joy throughout the week for you. The Mbeumo penalty, it's interesting, right? What do you think about the celebration from Wissa before he's kicked the ball?
I absolutely love it from Wissa. That is like classic, just what you love to see.
It's perfect shithousery, right? It's exactly the kind of thing we all love. And I've got just one small issue with it.
Yeah.
And I think you'll probably empathise with me when I say this. You can't run across the line of sight of the goalkeeper doing that. That is interfering with play.
Is it really? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure Henderson's been affected by Vissa doing that. I think it's just one of those where, he's probably seen it in his peripheral vision, but I don't think it's going to actually impact him making that save. So I think it's brilliant from Vissa, but it's just ironic because of obviously what happened with Gerhi in the first place to kind of have that encroachment, and then it's like he's got the encroachment, Gerhi, from basically standing in the edge of the D, not actually within the penalty box itself. And so it's like the fact that then Vista chooses to run basically near the D is just like it's just great troll.
No, and it was fun, and look, it wasn't anything that impacted me or my team for a change, so there won't be too many complaints. But it was one thing that I'm watching it. I love it, but at the same time, that would work against me. It would
Yeah.
definitely work. My head would turn.
Yeah, it was frustrating.
Like there would be something there. It would be that there's not much time. As you know, at our level, it's a complete guess game, right? Where someone is going to kick the ball faster than I can. I can't wait for it, right? And even more so at the pro level, they'll often be diving beforehand. When I was looking back at some of the recordings from the FPL Juice 5-a-side at my penalty saves, in my head they were fantastic. When you actually watch them, you're basically lying down by the time they've kicked the ball because you go that early. So, you know, on that thing, if it takes that split second of your attention away and that reaction, then and it's allowed, then surely we'll see more people implementing it because it will be impactful. Even if it's only 1% of the time it works, that's an extra percent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing I thought was crazy about that Brentford game was the bonus points that were taken away from Mbeumo, because it was just like, if that game gets played on a Sunday, like versus a Saturday, if it gets played a day before, he gets those bonus points. It's just like, it's just crazy. I think the way that, you know, because Opta changed the, you know, the kind of chances that were registered in the game. It feels like these late changes to bonus points have ruined the game this season, from my view. I think it's just it's meant that you've kind of had certain scores going into the final week, and it's just been based on the schedule of what game is on what day, of whether you get the rub of the green. It feels like.
Yeah, there's elements of that, and I can sympathise to an extent. On the Mbeumo one, it almost does feel like it's evened out, right? Where he got the goal, but he lost the bonus. So it's almost like, right, fine, like you kind of take the rough with the smooth. But also, these changes quite often are rarely, I'm going to say rarely, more than one bonus point that it impacts. And if we look at sort of the scores that we're aiming for most weeks, it's around that sort of 60 plus, right? So I think it have that impact, but we are talking just over 1%. So obviously we want all those gains, but, and I get it when it's frustrating when it's your player, and it is about the timing of the games, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. I would like to say that I beat your score, but I didn't, because I took a -4, Roberto. I got 2 people out. Who did I take out? I can't even remember. One was Jossa, and the other, I think, was finally Liam Delap, even though I've got Solanke still injured. But similar to you, bought in Gakpo, bought in Diaz, and actually, I wanted Sobsolai, so I don't know why I went Diaz in the end. And slight regrets on that. And I heard Baker talking about that on yours and on the above average FPL. And I think that's why I wanted Sobsolai, because he was talking about it a bit.
Yeah.
But I didn't go there. Ahmad didn't do anything. Saar didn't do anything. Palmer didn't do anything. But those strikers in Gakpo and Isak basically carried my team. Pedro Porro outscoring Trent was a nice surprise.
Yeah.
With his bonus points.
Lovely. Well done for that, because he's one that I've owned this season, and I had him for so long, and then it just got to a stage where I just thought, I can't be bothered with this anymore. They're conceding goals every game, and he's getting no attacking returns. And then literally in the last sort of like 7 weeks, he's got like a few assists, and it's just typical, isn't it? As soon as you take him out, but yeah, fair play.
I also went a couple of weeks ago. I went early by bringing Porro in with Solanke. Because I thought, I'm going to target this run for Spurs, even if I don't think they'll keep clean sheets. This attack will be good for me. And I went so early that Solanke got injured before playing a minute for me. So he's someone that's now just sitting there and occupying quite a bit of money in my team. But yeah, I think, look, a lot of people captain Salah as they would have done with the news about Isak, and no other real surprises there. So I think, look, if we jump into this week's matches, we've got the extra one, obviously, but yeah, I guess Roberto, and I'll say it for people that might be listening in or watching for the first time, but the way that we've got this scored here, this is just overall, and it's matched on XG. So the top team for XG scored would be 1, the worst would be 20, and for against, the one that's conceded the least would be 1, and obviously the one that concedes the most would be 20. So in an ideal situation, you're getting a XG4 of 1 against an XG against of 20. And they're obviously the dream situations we're looking for. So I guess having a look at this, is there anything that stands out for you in terms of surprises, games where you think, I don't have someone from that team, but I could see them causing some damage for the opposition?
Yeah, it's a good question, because, you know, maybe Manchester United is the main one, because obviously a lot of people have said you shouldn't go anywhere near their attack outside of Ahmad. But it's interesting to see just how much they are kind of causing that XG4 with 13 there. I mean, their fixtures obviously are a bit like mixed, and I think this is why it's tricky with Man United, especially if you have Ahmad, because there are so many good cheap midfielders at the moment. Those Bournemouth mids, obviously, you got potential moves to get Mbumo soon as well. So there's so much competition for those midfield places. But yet, Ahmad still remains a really good pick because obviously it's interesting now that we've had the news about double game week 25 because I think that now means that I think a lot of people are going to bring in players who double in 25 and then will then basically inevitably blank in 29. So it almost forces a free hit in 29. But I was looking at non-free hit in 29 and therefore would be keeping Ahmad for that good fixture against Leicester in that week. So it's kind of like, it's a shame for me. I still think Ahmad's a good sort of hold, but it is interesting when you see other midfield options cropping up. And yeah, even though the XG is there for Man United, it just does look tempting to move it on with other great options.
It's hard, isn't it, on that price range where, to an extent, because of how enabling they are and their price point, and that's why they're not going to be your return every week, right? And it feels that this season we've had these bursts from these sort of 5.5, 6 mil players where they've suddenly gone, this is the one I need to have and consistent. And when you don't move early on it, do you now move or are you now too late to move? And then suddenly there's 3 of them in the same team in the case of Bournemouth where you go, well, now I just don't even know which one I go for. Yeah, but yeah, I'd agree with you that I think United, they could do well. One that stood out to me here, and actually I'm thinking back, I got Gakpo in by selling Jackson, and I'm looking at Chelsea. They are the second best team for XG, and West Ham are the 17th, so one of the worst for XG against. So in terms of creating chances in this game, Chelsea should create a lot.
Yeah.
And whilst Jackson's not clinical, a lot probably means a return for him with a lot of chances.
Yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? Because this is why Jackson is so frustrating. He's a great asset for having chances, and I've held him basically since I think I brought him in game week 14 for Isak when there was those doubts over Isak's fitness, and Jackson had Southampton and obviously got benched for that game, and that was very frustrating. But the run for fixtures for Chelsea at that stage was just so good for so long, and it just meant made sense to kind of keep the faith with him. But even in the great fixtures, Jackson has shown he's really, going back to sort of the form he showed last season. He started the season so well, but it's that erratic finishing, which, when you're paying as much as you are for Jackson, just over 8 million, you just need someone who's going to be a bit more efficient with chances. And you look at someone cheaper like a Visser, who obviously Brentford have got nice fixtures coming up, and then you really can't justify that difference in price. So yeah, I do think Chelsea will always create chances, and that's why we own Cole Palmer at the moment, because he's just their absolute maestro for doing that. And the fixtures for Chelsea, especially in 28, 27, they're definitely going to be great. But it's just a wonder of, will Jackson keep up this run of just missing chances? Because there's obviously Nkunku, who was rumored to kind of make the move, and there's still a chance he could leave before the window. So we'll have to see with that. But yeah, I just can't watch Jackson every week in my team. It's just too frustrating, personally.
He is one of those, definitely. Yeah, I'd agree. It's hard. There's certain games where you don't even want to watch when you own your players, because you'd rather just see the results of the game and have a pleasant surprise. And I think he's one of them. I think when Darwin was playing at times, that was definitely another one. I think looking at this, another one that does stand out is, look, it's part of the double, but Bournemouth v Liverpool, we've got the 5th best defense against the 2nd best defense in terms of conceding XG, which looked, I guess looking at that and then looking at Everton's XG for being 20 for the other part of the double, you could be looking at doing quite well if you have a couple of Liverpool defenders for the double game week there. But then you do have Bournemouth just creating a lot of XG, so it's whether or not they convert it.
That's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, Bournemouth are always a team that create chances, and we've seen that through previous game weeks with, I think a lot of people got frustrated by Semenyo because he went on that run of just having so many shots in games, but the kind of accuracy of those shots was not really good enough. So it's really tempting to kind of look at that Bournemouth team and go for them early, because yes, there will be kind of limited chances in that Liverpool game because we know how good defensively they are, but Bournemouth are just a side that create chances. And they don't actually make it that easy from a kind of defensive point of view for Liverpool. So I don't think that'll be a kind of game full of goals. But when you've got that great fixture against Southampton in 25 for Bournemouth, it's very tempting to go early on the likes of Kluivert and maybe even Ouattara as well.
No, exactly. Let's click along because obviously XG one thing, but the goals are kind of the things where we really want to see, and we can kind of see some jumps here where Bournemouth 3 for XG 4, but 7th for goals 4. Chelsea sort of tracking around the same with 2nd for XG and now scoring quite a lot of goals, and Arsenal being the joint best defence now with Liverpool, and then you've got sort of Newcastle and Bournemouth with the third best defence. So yeah. I guess looking at this, is there anything different to what we were seeing? Apart from maybe this Spurs-Brentford game on the goals metric. So on the XG metric, you've got 9th against 6th, which, fine. On the goals metric, you've got 5th against 4th.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's like that Brentford-Spurs game, I'd be very surprised if it doesn't have a lot of goals because both teams defensively, they've been so suspect this season. But it's always the way with Brentford is they're just a different beast at home. And so any team can go there and really struggle. So this is why I think it's interesting that a lot of people are looking at that Bournemouth midfielder versus the Brentford one and saying, well, you know, the fixture for Bournemouth is probably better in 25, but we could just go early with Mbeumo and be done with it. But I guess this is the issue. We've got other transfers to make, you know, potential chips to play. And so it's almost like it's come at an awkward time for a lot of FPL managers because we can't fit them all in all at once. So I definitely think Brentford and someone like Johan Visser just looks so much sense in the next few weeks when people might still have Jackson or Solanke or kind of burning problems in their team, like the likes of Pedro, who's just not been informed. So yeah, I honestly, I'm struggling to kind of justify not going for Brentford attack in Game Week 24, but I just don't think I'm going to have the luxury because I think in the next few weeks we're going to want to build up transfers. So it's patience that will probably pay off in the end, but it's very tempting. 100%.
And it does depend, and we'll come on to it, but it depends. You know, if you're looking at using the assistant manager chip, are you looking to use a transfer between those because that needs to come into consideration? Obviously, with it costing you between those game weeks. I guess another one, and just the final one here, because we do have this split down into home and away now with the amount of games we've had played. So obviously a bit more insight on some of that data.
Yeah.
But Man City being 8th for goals conceded and Arsenal being 5th is one that stands out. And the other one being the Ipswich-Southampton game, which, look, I don't think the goals are going to be reflective of it in terms of what they've both done so far against other teams, because this would suggest a 0-0, right? When you've got the 18th best attack against the 20th best attack.
Yeah.
But then they both have open goals, essentially, with 17th and 20th best defences. So,
yeah, I mean, if that game is goalless, I'd be very shocked because it's just the quality of those defenses you've got to look at. And, you know, Southampton will go for that game because they know it's realistically their best chance of beating a promoted side this season, because I don't think they'll beat Leicester this season. So, you know, Ipswich have gone on this little run now where they've conceded goals. And, you know, I know that they're a sort of team that can shock an opposition. You know, they've done it against the likes of Chelsea and Tottenham this season, but I do worry for Ipswich in these sort of matches because although they can score goals, they're just their style of play. And Wharton, to be fair, since he's come in, has done quite well. But I just think their philosophy under McKenna is always going to be, let's go for this and let's not kind of put the handbrake on in a defensive standpoint. So I don't see this being an absolute thrashing from Ipswich. I think it could actually be tighter than a lot of people think.
Well, I think that's it. And if we're looking at how the XG matchups are for home and away, Ipswich are the worst home attack, and Southampton are 17th for away attack, so not the worst in that one. So actually, maybe it is Southampton who could come away in that game from it. And I think as well, it's interesting to see that if we look at the XG matchup in that Arsenal City game again, we're looking at the third best home attack against the 15th best away defense. So that would be suggesting, maybe the action will favour Arsenal. But again, look, let's actually convert that into the goals. City have jumped from 15th to 7th, and Arsenal have dropped from 3rd to 5th. So Arsenal not really taking as many chances, and City actually not conceding goals, whether that's down to goalkeeper, last minute saves on the line, or sort of defenders making those blocks. But actually, it does drop down quite a bit. And we see Bournemouth drop down at home now to 9th for their attack at home, which does start making it interesting again about that Liverpool defence when we break up the home-away matchup, with them facing now the 9th best attack and the 18th best attack.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like earlier we said about Liverpool defence looking good, but This is the problem. You're facing two informed teams in Bournemouth and Everton. As much as Everton defensively are much stronger than going forward, they could still cause problems in that Merseyside derby because of the nature of the match and the occasion of the last at Goodison Park. So I think Bournemouth definitely will score. Will Everton? I don't know. This is the question, I suppose. But
there's so much more to it than football. Exactly. Like, I think there's so many games this week where the data is not a true reflection of it, right? Where
exactly.
What we can see here, I do agree with this, and it does sort of again reiterate your point and maybe start making you think more and more on the eve of the deadline about a Brentford attacker, but Brentford being the top scoring home team. So the most goals scored of any team at home this season against a team that have conceded the 13th most amount of goals away from home.
Yeah.
And as we can see, Brentford's record defensively at home, they are the 50th. They've conceded the 15th most at home. So they're going to concede. It's going to be an open game. And this could be sort of your 3-2, 3-all, 4-3 type of game.
Yeah. And Spurs aren't that far away in terms of goals conceded compared to Southampton. Like, I think a lot of people will just say Southampton are far and away, but it's not actually that much of a gap. So, yeah, I mean, Spurs are just, they're such a team where you can target, but it's also interesting when it comes to the assistant manager because you can look at them and say, well, surely when Ange goes, there'll be a team to target for the assistant manager because you could look at them and think on their day they should beat these sides that, on really the kind of tougher matches that Spurs seem to get themselves up for. So they've got great potential there from an attacking point of view, but the defense has just never been an option, and that it's proving to stay that way for a while.
No, I'd agree with that. And apologies, I got distracted there. My cat has broken his way into the I'd say recording studio. It's not into the office. So I'll try and avoid him from meowing because he's very vocal and thinks I'm always talking to him and that he needs to talk back. So hopefully that doesn't come across too much on the mic to people. Look, I've also got the shots match up here split by home and away, which again, I just like to look at it because it kind of gives me interest in some of the games that I'll want to watch if I'm seeing a team that has a lot of shots. There's not too much you can take from it apart from Wolves don't really have that many shots at home. And Brentford concede a lot of shots at home and Southampton concede a lot of shots away.
Yeah.
And Leicester don't take many shots at home. So Everton might not face that many shots, and Everton are pretty decent, sort of mid-table for facing shots. Again, shots are just more that entertainment value. Most teams have, give or take, roughly the same XG average from the shots they take. There's a few teams that are sort of sub 0.1, but the average in the league is 0.13. So again, like, it can be quite a large amount between 0.1 and 0.13, right? We are talking 30% difference and success chance of your shots, but it's nothing major on a lot of these.
I think it is interesting. We do have this kind of theory around the Everton defence that they're almost impenetrable when they're at Goodison Park, but those stats around Leicester shots for 19, it's one to think about because it's not like it's an absolute tap in, but it's very tempting to look at an Everton defender for the double. But you could look at those games against Spurs and against Brighton where they have rode their luck against Brighton. They have ultimately conceded 2 late goals to Spurs, so there's not this kind of defensive superiority that maybe we saw earlier on in the season. Just because of Everton's approach, I think, is going to be a bit more offensive than they were under Dyche, under Moyes. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be squeaky clean necessarily, but generally we would back an Everton clean sheet in that Leicester game, and then who knows what the Liverpool game could be, right?
It's an interesting one, right? Because I think it's one of those as well where if you're someone who owns a Leicester attacker, you own them for this Everton game, right? So it's interesting how narratives change where if you're a Leicester footballer right now, this is a game, this is an away game that you're looking at going, we can do something here. You're not looking at Arsenal away. Arsenal away, you're going, imagine if we do, and like we can really get our fans going behind us. But you're looking at Everton, you're looking at Wolves, you're looking at Ipswich, etc. Going, right, this is where we've got a chance to get 3 points. So, it'll be an interesting one. And again, it's just where things might not quite line up. Look, here I've moved on to the form metric. Yep. Okay, cool. The cat's found something to play with. I have moved on to the form metric. So look, this is the last 6 games and the form table. And it's broken down with Newcastle being the most informed team with 15 points from the last 6 and scoring 2.33 goals per game. City have been scoring, averaging 3 goals per game over the last 6 matches and conceding 0.83.
It's very
which is
strong.
interesting.
It is very strong. But this is the problem: is City are just a team like they're kind of just in the background that we're not looking at, but we have to think about in sort of 6-7 game weeks time because the fixtures are just not there at the moment.
Well, they've got a striker now that's making it a lot more tempting, right? In Marmoush, who almost half the price of Haaland, and you get into that, and you can sort of partner him with your Foden. I think Gvardiol is going to be in a lot of people's thinking very, very soon as well.
Yeah,
I think Gabriel to Gvardiol or a Trent to Gvardiol will be on the cards.
Yeah, this goes back to what we were saying earlier about 29. I think 28, 29, everyone's going to be loading back on them because it's just the signs that they're showing in these games, as much as they are, not blowing teams away. We saw in the Chelsea game, they did take a while to get going, but they're showing, very good positive signs. Marmoush's movement is just fantastic, and Foden is on that purple patch at the moment. So yeah, they're definitely there to kind of think about and not forget about, basically, come sort of game week 28, 29 again.
No, exactly. And I think, look, again, other things just that we've already seen in there, but Brentford averaging 1.6 goals per game and conceding 1.3 in the last 6 is quite encouraging. And Leicester only scoring 0.6 per game is another one that's beneficial there. Southampton conceding a lot at 2.83, Ipswich at 2.5, and West Ham at 2.33 in recent games. And Everton look like 1-1 in every game now, sort of average 0.83 and scoring and 1.17 conceding in the last 6 games there. So we are starting to see some trends now.
Yeah, it feels like we can kind of take a bit more from this data than we previously could. It did feel a little bit more scattergun before, so it's interesting going into these kind of next 2 doubles where we can actually start to kind of use the data to kind of transfer in players, whether they have a double or not. A bit more kind of with purpose, I think.
Exactly. Now, the title from this one's disappeared, so I had to go back to the presentation myself. But this is the last 4 home games. So form table for the teams at home recently. And Forest topped that. Last 4 games, they have won 3, drawn 1, and conceded 4 goals in that time. So they've been doing well. What I've also got matched up on this one, though, Roberto, to kind of put context, because you can go, well, in the last 4 home games, maybe they've had easy fixtures. Well, we've got their opposition's points per game average on the side there. So Forest have been doing it against teams that average 1.2 points per game. Now, the worst team average there is 1.93, and the best is only 0.94, right? So they haven't been going against the easiest teams in the league necessarily.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I think Fulham sitting quite low down at home when typically we think they're quite good at home.
That is interesting.
And the opposition, one of the weakest as well, 0.94 as the average points per game of their opposition. And they've only picked up 3 points in their last 4 home games.
I mean, there is this narrative around for Fulham where they're defensively, we think they're really solid. The last few weeks, Fulham have kind of been disappointing with clean sheets compared to what you kind of would expect from their underlying data. And yeah, the kind of goal conceded there per game, 1.25 it's a lot more than I thought they would have, to be honest. So it makes you think about players like Castagna, players like Robinson, where, if you aren't getting those attacking returns, they do lose that appeal. But obviously with the potential double, then they could be back on the menu again, I guess.
Exactly. And I guess there's a couple of other ones that stand out here just in terms of matchups for this week. In the last 4 games at home, Ipswich have conceded 12 goals and scored 2.
Yeah. This is what I was saying earlier. Like, it's their style of play. It leaves them too open. Like, even in the game where Ipswich, played well, like, for instance, you look at the Man United match, right? They concede that goal so early. They dominate the rest of the match, really. They have chances, at least, but they just still start games too open. And that's part of their issue. They're giving themselves too much work to go and get results, and they're giving themselves too much of a task, really. So yeah, I'm concerned from Ipswich from a defensive standpoint, but I still think Southampton will be worried from their defense point of view because Ipswich do always create a lot of chances, and that's where maybe it's a game where Delap could do well.
No, exactly. And look, the final one that I'll just highlight here: in the last 4 home games, Bournemouth have conceded 1 goal.
It's very strong. It's very, very good. And this is the
Uh,
thing. Like, people don't look at Bournemouth defence, do they? Really? I mean, outside of Kirkes, Hoyson has been kind of under the radar, and people have not looked at him. But the saving you get from going for Hoyson over Kirkes is massive, right? And when we want to save money in these next few weeks with the assistant manager a factor in our transfers, I think Bournemouth have to be looked at. But it's always tricky because you look at players like Zabarnyi that don't usually get attacking returns, other than that amazing double game week last season. And you look at other players, they're just not that appealing from an offensive standpoint outside of someone like a Kirkes. But defensively, as a unit, they have to be kind of looked at because, their numbers are so impressive.
They really are. And look, let's look at the away ones here, sort of for a comparison. Newcastle. Well, actually, no, let's jump straight to it. Liverpool at home, and this is where the matchup becomes really interesting. So Bournemouth have conceded 1 goal at home in their last 4 matches. Liverpool have scored 14 goals away from home in their last 4 matches.
Yeah, it's a joke. I mean, I don't know how that tally is not like 15, 16, 17 after watching the highlights of the Brentford game. I mean, how many chances did they create? So that's the thing you're going to get with the Liverpool side away from home, is they're going to have chances. And this is going to be the classic kind of test of the two strong sort of opponents, where you've got a Bournemouth defence that makes it tough for creating chances, and a Liverpool defense attack that really always creates them. So something's got to give, I think. I think it's either going to be a big kind of Liverpool surprise win, or maybe a blunt away performance for Liverpool for the first time in a long time. Because they do create chances, but Bournemouth are not an easy team to go up against for sure.
No, they're not. I guess another one that is interesting to me here, it's unfortunate Everton are playing at home in some ways, because away from home in their last 4 games, they've conceded 2 goals. And that's not the only impressive thing. The average opponent's points per game in those 4 has been 1.91, which is the highest we've seen on any of those. So they've had the toughest opponents they could and conceded 2 goals.
Yeah, that's the thing. This is why Everton are a really confusing defence, because they seem to get up. They're a bit like Man United, right? Whereas Man United get up for the games from an offensive point of view against the more difficult sides. And we often look at like players like Palmer and players like Haaland against Man United. But this season, it's been actually, you should target the kind of attackers from weaker teams, because they're the ones that seem to run right against Man United. Where you flip it against Everton, you look at, well, what are the games we can really target from a captaincy point of view against Everton? And it's not really the big teams that tend to haul. There's been a few occasions over the years, and this season there's been a few, but generally they just make it hard against the teams that generally dominate the ball, have chances, and really dominate. And you look at the Arsenal-Everton game, that was a prime example. I think a lot of people did look at Saka, and yet Everton find a way to kind of stifle, the kind of big teams' main threats in that matchup. So, yeah, this is why I'm concerned for Everton defensively for the Leicester game, because on paper it looks great, but they're often more defensively weak against the teams around them.
Yeah. Well, here's an interesting one, and actually, Mike Saville, who I know who is goalkeeper, FPL. Is he FPL goalie? I think
so. Yeah.
But yeah, he's in a group chat with me, and he posted the last 10 results between Everton and Liverpool at Goodison.
Yeah.
2-0 Everton, 0-0. 4-1 Liverpool, 2-all. 0-0, 0-0, 0-0. 1-0 Liverpool, 1-all, 0-0.
Yeah. They're often very tight. They are, and that I remember that 4-1 because I think it was a midweek game, and I seem to remember Salah scored and Jota scored, and it was one of those where the scoreline maybe doesn't quite fairly reflect on Everton, because I seem to remember in that game they kept it tight for the majority, but then I think Liverpool scored a few late goals. So Liverpool, obviously this season, are different levels to what they've been the last few seasons that they've played Everton, and I think the Jurgen Klopp side, the last couple of seasons prior to this, would have probably struggled a lot more up at Goodison. But I'm just struggling to find reasons to kind of doubt Liverpool's side under Arne Slot at the moment. And this is why I think a lot of people are just defaulting to Slot as assistant manager, because yes, the fixtures aren't great from a double perspective, but for a goal scored perspective for the kind of assistant manager chip, we don't doubt them in many matches. And Everton is, still fairly fresh under Moyes. And I know that they've got good performances in there, but it's the sort of game Liverpool could still put a few past them.
No, it definitely is. Another one I just want to highlight on here is Palace in their last 4 away games have conceded 1 goal. And they have scored 7. Now, if we go back and look at Man United in their last 4 home games, they've conceded, 9 and scored 4. So, Munoz owners,
I think
might be worth playing him.
Yeah, this is the thing. I in my own team, right, I've got this decision between starting Ahmad, right? And it's tricky because he's not a terrible option home to Palace, but the way Palace defensive numbers have kind of really increased since the start of the season, where they really started poorly, they've really gone on a kind of defensive showing of quality, and Henderson, getting those back-to-back clean sheets. So it's very tempting to look at that Man United away game and think, oh, that's benchable for Munoz. But I think Palace get a clean sheet there. Genuinely, I think the way that Xerxes and Højlund are playing, it's just down to Ahmad at the moment. So if he's not on form and he's not kind of dragging United through that game, I could see Munoz attacking returns, potentially a clean sheet there as well.
Well, look at this, Roberto. In their last 4 home games, Palace have conceded 9 goals, and their opponent's average points per game has been 1.12. So relatively weak, and they've conceded 9. Away from home, they've conceded 1, and their opponents have been better with 1.3. So Palace away from home against better teams tend to be more solid defensively.
Yeah.
Which again, you start seeing some weird anomalies based on recent form on some of these ones here.
Definitely.
Perfect. Well, look, let's well, here's an interesting one. I prepared this on, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah.
And normally we'd pod on a Thursday, myself and Shane, and I haven't done much on this apart from nothing apart from add your team in instead of Shane's.
Yeah.
And this week's discomfort zone was seeing if now's the time to go for the assistant manager chip. And what I've got here, Roberto, and you might have to squint and look forward, is each team and then game week. So the first one is the current gap between the league. The second one's the opponent's form in the last 8 games, with 1 being the best team and 20th being the worst form. And the third one being the opponent's goals conceded rank overall, with, again, 1 being the best defence, 20th being the worst defence. Because we get points here for that league gap, we get points for winning, and we get points for goals.
Yeah.
So it's really looking into those and seeing where we could see it. And for this week, the teams with the points gaps are Bournemouth, Brighton. To Brighton? I'm trying to remember here because some of the data went wrong on some of this as I was putting it through. Let's just double check.
Brighton do. Yeah.
Brighton do. Everton have it in one of the games. Fulham creep into it. West Ham and Wolves. And then when you move across, you can start seeing some of the ones that are quite nice there. So it's a shame that Ipswich don't have the gap because they're playing against the worst form team that have conceded the most amount of goals. In some ways, so if they had the gap. And similar for their opponents, Southampton, it's a shame they're not playing a better team because they're playing the 17th on both of those. But it does stand out here that Everton are playing 1 game against a team that are not great on form at the moment and concede a lot of goals, and 1 team where they've got the points gap.
Yeah. That's the thing. That's why Moyes is such a popular assistant manager this week, because not just the double game week, you've got someone who is showing form in Moyes at that Everton team, but also it's not just any fixture for a bonus. It's the biggest fixture for Everton season, right? They'll want to go out on a high at Goodison. And Liverpool, yes, they have, been amazing under Slot, but prior to, I think I mentioned it when we had a trophy FPL Mo on the former temporary recently, and he said how there has been a recent drop off in terms of their attacking performances prior to that Ipswich game, and this is why I'm thinking it won't be as easy of a kind of walkthrough, maybe potentially for Liverpool than a lot of people are imagining, because they seem to have kind of had a bit of a lack of fluidity in that kind of chosen front three. Although it's been really good this season, Diaz, Gakpo, and Salah. Diaz has dropped off by quite a fair bit, and so it's tricky because if you're relying on Gakpo to always do a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot of the crosses in, and Salah's there and he's always, a menace, but you kind of need all three to be on sync. And I don't think Diaz is there at the moment. He's not quite the same form he was showing at the start of the season. So it really does make Moyes, if the game is nervy, the game is sort of kind of red card sort of affair where both teams are going at each other, it does point towards at least clean sheet points for that Moyes assistant manager, and potentially a draw could be great, because let's not forget, if you go for an Arnie slot, you get less points for a win for Liverpool than you do for a draw for Moyes. So those sort of differences are, I think, quite key when it comes to 24.
No, they definitely are, and I agree with you on that. I think, again, for people who might be viewing this, and it is hard and you'd have to zoom in, but you're kind of looking for greens across the board where you can here. And this doesn't have a double game week for game week 25 in here yet. Again, this was all sort of prepared before the announcement, but my eyes had already been lined up on potentially moving over to Fulham just for that gap there of it being 7.
Yeah.
I guess the one thing that's now beneficial, and one that I am seriously considering, is Unai Emery, because his game was good in terms of the form that he's up against and the opponent's rank for goals conceded. But now he's also going to have a fixture where he should have that gap in there, which is good.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is the thing. The chances are that I'd be very surprised if Spurs did turn Liverpool over in that game at Anfield, and I could imagine Villa most likely get that double. So then you're looking at that Emery kind of game week 25, and I mean the matchup for Emery this week still looks great without the bonus. So you can get kind of a lot of points without the bonus, but then really target Emery for 25 as well. And this is the thing about this game week, where you've got a lot of table bonus opportunities for players, for managers, that also don't look bad the next week. So if you wanted to go for someone outside of the double game weekers and you went for a silver, for instance, against Newcastle, which still feels great, then you've got silver again against Forest in 25, and a potential double if Spurs do win their game. So yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of opportunities to really be different in 24 if you don't want to go for Slot or David Moyes.
No, exactly that. And I think as well, when we're then looking at the one that I'd been tempted by quite a bit actually for game week, I myself am probably looking to just take advantage of the gap and just use my transfer each week to go after different managers if I can see that opportunity. And I've been toying with Leicester with Rude for that matchup for them. But another one that's definitely on the radar is if City can lose a couple of games, then Pep against Liverpool just feels good.
It does.
To get a 5 bonus with City always just feels good.
It does. And that's the sort of game where Liverpool know that that's a game where City, they don't basically want to let them run away with it. And I genuinely think City in these sort of big games, we see it, the game coming up this weekend. I think they defensively haven't been good enough this season. And even in the teams that they've faced, like Chelsea, like earlier in the season, Tottenham, City have just been so suspect defensively. So that provides opportunities for Liverpool. But I still think City are so good enough from an attacking perspective that, Pep could be a great pick for kind of an ass man in 26, because they're going to score goals. I don't think there's any doubt in that, with them being, fighting for that Champions League spot. It's just, you're not probably likely to get the clean sheet bonus is the only thing. But because you've got the table bonus, it doesn't matter too much. So you can kind of make up that difference with someone, like Pep, who, when City are on their day, they're a fantastic way to get into the assistant manager points. Hello?
Sorry, I had muted myself on the microphone itself there.
No worries.
Here's one that I think no one's talking about for the third game week option, for anyone that is on it, but I think becomes more and more of a possibility if the final piece of the jigsaw falls into place. But Ipswich, playing against the 19th team on form, they need that team to win a game. that team concedes a lot of goals because that team is Tottenham Hotspurs.
Yeah.
And so you could go into that, and Spurs off the back of a double game week, could be a little bit tired.
There's potential. There's definitely potential there. I think of all the promoted teams, you mentioned Van Nistelrooy, but I there was no doubt when the kind of prices came out, and obviously we expected the promoted clubs managers to have the same prices. And we saw obviously the likes of Pereira at Wolves, and Wolves are a team that are kind of near the bottom of the table, but they're still a bit more. That he's a bit more pricey. But I just think for if you're picking like one manager at 0.5, I think the best option is McKenna. Now, if McKenna doubled this week, I'd probably have picked him over Moyes. But it's just I think the back-to-back sort of doubles makes it appealing for Moyes in that Merseyside derby. So, I honestly think when I'd looked at assistant manager later on in the season, I was pretty much bookmarking that 36 to 38 for Ipswich, because they might have been a team where they're still fighting for safety. They're playing teams maybe that don't have much to play for, and they've got a big incentive to go for it. And that Spurs game, we know they beat them in the reverse fixture. The Spurs team could be without Ange Postecoglou, and I know that might actually improve Spurs' chances by then. But still, even if Ange is still in charge, I just don't see Spurs keeping clean sheets anytime soon. So genuinely think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, you get your goals bonus, your league bonus, hopefully by that point. All it needs is if Ipswich lose to Southampton, then that could be your way towards it. So interesting times ahead on all of that. Right, I guess jumping into the final things then, Roberto, is looking ahead into how our teams look. So first, we will jump over to yours and get you to share what you've done with your team this week, if anything.
Yeah, so it's really interesting for me this week, because on the pod for the Form is Temporary, it was a pleasure to have Baker on, and we didn't actually talk much transfers. It was all about assistant manager and triple captain, really. But in my head, I thought, well, I don't want to do too much for my team, because the next few weeks I'm going to want to roll quite a few times, and I feel like I'm quite well set up at the moment with Henderson, Hall, Trent, Gabriel, Gordon, Salah, Palmer, Rodgers, Wood, Gakpo, and Isak. Like, there's not really anything you need to change there. And the bench is interesting, because I've had this all season where it's quite a kind of strong squad depth, and it does cause me problems. But I prefer it that way around than having less options. But it's interesting because looking ahead to 29, I was thinking, I'm going to be selling Gordon soon. I'm going to be selling those players that potentially blank in 29. But now that this double game week 25 announcements come in, I think I'm more weighing towards I don't mind free hitting now, because we're going to be bringing in players in 25 that then do blank in 29. So I think I've actually decided I was going to do one transfer and just leave it at that, because I have two going into this week for free. I was just going to do one transfer and roll the other, and do Henderson to Pickford, because Henderson obviously we think probably won't play in 29, and Pickford obviously had the double, and I've already got triple Liverpool ready to go. But then I thought, well, when the double game week announcement came in, I thought, well, I had triple captain Salah active, and I was pretty tempted by that, because there's not going to be many opportunities to kind of use that chip. And I factored in assistant manager for a later period. But I think you just had to make advantage of that 5 fixtures in 3 weeks with assistant manager. Like the potential upside is massive if you go for a table bonus in all those weeks. And because of the fact that I've got those 2 free transfers heading into this week, rolling again gives me that flexibility to then move David Moyes on. So I've gone for David Moyes on assistant manager, just because I think if I went for Slot, I'd be taking out Gakpo, and I don't think that's really warranted at the moment. I think Slot is not a bad pick for safety, but I'm always the one that chases the upside and loves the table bonus potential there. And so then by not making a transfer in my players this week and keeping Henderson, it allows me to then have 3 free transfers for next week. And that way I can basically have plenty of transfers to move around money. And if I need to get to a expensive manager that doubles, whether that be a Ange Postecoglou or even as cheap as someone else like an Emery, then I've got that flexibility. Whereas if I, had made a few transfers, I might have kind of limited myself with manager changes further down the line.
I think it makes perfect sense as you explain there, where having that ability to target the upside. I agree. I think slot can do well, but it's less exciting as well because it does rely on the goals element of it.
Yeah.
These are the games to target, and Charlie FPL Meerkat's been doing the analysis for a few weeks beforehand and said, look, you want a manager when there's the 5 points, where like whichever team you want it from doesn't matter. You might want the one that's 5 ahead, but the floor for the winning manager is, I think, 8 points.
Yeah,
which is decent. So yeah, I like the team. I'd agree with who you've got starting there, and actually we'll come on to mine here, Roberto, because that's not mine. That's the wrong way because it's somewhat similar. But I'm thinking more as we've gone through this, and again, I comprise all of the data, and there's certain things I look at the time, but there's others when I'm presenting it that I go, oh, hang on a second. And I had initially chosen to, I'll run through the team. I've got Sanchez, I've got Pedro. Well, Sanchez still there. I just can't get rid of him. He's just staying for life until he gets dropped, to be honest. I've got
Which
Pedro
might not be that far away, to be honest. It might not be that far away.
But the thing is, and I'd said it at pre-season, so I'd done a bit of analysis on Maresca and his style of play. And Chelsea didn't have a goalkeeper that was his style of play. So I was pretty confident they still signed another goalkeeper. And then they went out and signed a goalkeeper in Jorgensen who doesn't play Maresca's style of play. If anyone wants an example of a goalie who does it, is Hermansen, who played under Maresca, so unsurprisingly plays with Maresca's style of play. So yeah, bit of miss as to why they didn't go for him, because I think he is what they're looking for with that free flow and comfortable with the ball at his feet, etc. But I'm stuck with Sanchez. Defense-wise, I've got Porro. I'm also starting Gabriel and Hall. And midfield of Palmer. Look, Diaz is in my team, and I'd considered sideways moves or other things for him. But it's just not worth it because 2 games with him, he could haul. He actually could. He's one of those players. Even 20 minutes in each could be him getting 3 return type of thing.
Yeah. And I had Diaz prior to the game against... so it was the Man United game where he got subbed off early. And then I had the next week a decision to make of, did I sell Diaz ahead of Newcastle facing Wolves? And I moved on Diaz to Gordon. And then it gave me that flexibility of having, all right, now back to 2 Liverpool assets ahead of 23's Ipswich game. Can I then choose a different Liverpool asset? Because I didn't hate Luis Diaz because he scored against West Ham. He's not been terrible, but it's just these minutes, these early subs that kind of played on my mind. And it's just been the recent form he's shown, where I looked at Gakpo and thought, well, he's kind of got that left wing spot nailed down. So I don't hate Diaz. As you say, I think he could end up outscoring Gakpo, and I'll be a bit annoyed if that does happen. But I don't think it's the worst pick because obviously earlier on in the season, he was a fantastic option.
It's weird at the moment, right, where from an FPL perspective, we've got Gakpo playing on the left wing and we've got Diaz playing as a striker. But Gakpo is a striker on the game and Diaz is a midfielder. Yeah, it's the striker that right now is the better value one, despite being reverse out of position. So the anomalies. One thing that I've maybe I'll stick by it. Trent is great and the best attacking defender out of all of them. But this season, there were previous seasons where we go, he's better than a 7.5 million midfielder as part of a justification. This season, he's not. He's not better than a 6.5 million midfielder. So it's one of those where I 100% get him when people have the budget. And looking at your team, you're not necessarily missing out on anything by having him. You've got Chris Wood, you've got Rogers. Like they are your facilitators in there. So that's fine. It's other teams where I see it. I'm like, why have you butchered your team for Trent where you don't have that upside and you've got 3 cheap midfielders now to accommodate it?
It's always the way with Trent, isn't it? Like, he's there and he's always there, and he's one of those players where if you watch a Liverpool match without him, it's like watching a nightmare. Like it's not fun. But also there's the amount of games you watch him and you think, why do I pay this much to have him in my team? So there's 2 kind of angles to it when you can say, I'm going to own him and be kind of stubborn with him. And even in the weeks where I look at him and say he's not worth the value, I keep him because there will be the occasional week, like he did against West Ham, like he did against Brentford, where he will come up with an attacking return and he'll come up with a big haul. and that will be the difference between kind of going for a him or a Canarse. So it's tricky to justify when we've got so many great budget options this season in defence. But I think especially for these doubles, this is the time where those that have gone with Trent are just hoping that potential explosiveness does pay off, because it's hard to justify for a lot of weeks this season, but in the key moments he can just deliver and really blow players out of the water.
He can, and that's it. It is one of those where, like you said, there's certain games where you want him. He's had a 15 and an 11 in his last 5 games, but he's also had a 0 and a 2 in those 5. So it is. You need that consistency from him, but in a double game week, 100% he's very, very good to have, and it is where we want it. We also just noticed the irony where it will be Robertson as someone who hauls out of all of the defenders, because everyone's now touted up Canate as being better than Virgil or more value. So it'll be an interesting one either way. But going back to what we've seen through kind of going through the forms and stuff like that, I kept saying you probably want more Liverpool defence. I have none of it, and I have triple Liverpool attack for this game week with Salah and Gakpo partnering him. I have Isak starting, and I moved Wissa in for Solanke. There were 2 reasons why. One, he's playing Spurs.
Yeah.
And Solanke's injured and it's just might as well sort it out. The second one, I only had 0.3 million, and you could see the emoji in the top. At that time, I was thinking I wanted Moyes, and then I've got him. So I couldn't afford Moyes, basically, without bringing Wissa in. So it's benefited me. The one that I'm looking at here and the data, instinctively, you play the home player when you're going between home and away, particularly when they're playing each other.
Yeah.
And initially, I'm going Ahmad over Sarr. But actually, looking back at what we've looked at, I think I'll probably start Sarr over Ahmad now, which Ahmad is one that can return.
Yeah.
But I can't get past that fact that Palace have only conceded 1 goal in the last 4. I think after this pod, I might go back and watch highlights of the last 4 away games just to see how they were scoring at those times as well.
It is interesting with Sarr, because how do you think he's going to do without Eze? Because Eze is looking ruled out for that Man United game. So
then I like him more, right? Because when you actually look at when he was producing, it was when Eze wasn't in the team or when his minutes were being managed. But and Eze will be that main man, but when he's out, Palace actually create opportunities through different routes of it, and Eze won't be, well, when he's not playing, obviously he's not essential to it because he's not there. Whereas they do look at different routes to be able to spread that ball. When he isn't there, when he's there, they often just look for him because he's the best player in the team, right? He's the best ball carrier. He's one of the best passers, one of the best dribblers, the best shooter. So you give him the ball at almost every opportunity.
Yeah.
And therefore, the next action is dictated by his decision-making process, which is excellent. But he has so many different things he can do that him passing it to you when you make that great run isn't as much of a certainty compared to the ball going through an Adam Wharton more frequently or someone different. So, I think that's probably given me even more confirmation that I'll probably start Sarr over Ahmad. I wasn't aware of that, so that's useful info.
No worries.
And I guess the final one, I've activated the Moyes chip. My plan at the moment, and it was before the potential double game week mark, was to go to Marco Silva as the next one. And then, as I mentioned, sort of finish off maybe with a McKenna. If Spurs can get that gap there, I just think there's a good ceiling there with McKenna, and it would just be fun. And I agree with something that Adam from Above Average says of don't have bad players from bad teams. But I don't mind having their manager. I don't mind that. My mistake last season was having it, isn't it? I look at last season. My mistake last season, well, one of many lessons and takeaways, was I captained a Sheffield United player 3 times.
Wow, that is bold. I'll give you that.
Well, it's not bold though, is it? It's stupid. You're being very polite, Roberto, by calling it bold. But it's stubbornness. It's me. It's me when someone says no, I go, well, okay, I'll go up against it. And actually, if anyone wants proof of any of those things, I lost a little thing with Az from Black Box fame a number of weeks ago. Well, a very long time ago. I insinuated that moving from Calvert-Lewin to Cunha was like moving from Luton to Peterborough. You've got the opportunity to go for something more glamorous, and you've chosen to go to another shithole. And Az called me out on it. We bet that Wissa would score more goals than Cunha over the next certain few weeks. So I stand by
it. I stand by your comment, Shane.
I do.
Kieran, sorry. Because moving from anywhere is always an upgrade on Luton, so it's all good.
True, yeah, it was still an upgrade. But look, the key thing was I owed as a signed Karuma Toma Brighton shirt. So met with him a couple of weekends ago and presented that to him, which was, enjoyable. And maybe I'll just be a little bit more hesitant on my uncomfortable claims in future. But look, on this one, it is quite nice. I'm one of those people where sometimes I get annoyed when I've come up with an idea and everyone else falls in line with that and agrees. I go, well, now I've got to find something else. That has been my thinking on this assistant manager chair, where I'm going, well, maybe now I won't do what I was going to do. But no, I'm sticking to the plan. I'm learning to sort of take pride in the fact that you think of things that other people then do.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
get annoyed by the fact they're like, oh, no, they're all copying me. They're not copying me because I didn't tell anyone. There is zero chance.
The fact is, it shows you've come up with good logic to get to that decision. And so that good logic has been picked up by other managers who have the similar levels of intellect, I guess. So,
or like I am a broken clock and I say enough nonsense that it will be right twice a day. And this is one of those occasions. But no, that's kind of it from me for this week, Roberto. Is there anything you want to add? Anything you've seen? Anything that, with the announcements more recently on your mind?
The only thing I would say really is I think it's really important that these next few weeks we don't get. I know that there's a lot of double game week excitement, but we shouldn't necessarily make it the be all and end all, because it happens every season, doesn't it? Where you've got players with great single game weeks and players who've been in our teams for so long, and I think team value is going to be important, because when we do use our chips, for instance, wildcard and free hit in potentially 29, we're going to need good team value. Now, as this game week coming up has shown, I still stand by making transfers as late as possible, because those that did make transfers early have now been pretty much ruined by this game week's double game week 25's announcements, because you've probably gone for triple Liverpool and now you can't have the option of choosing slot, or you might have even gone for players like Mbumo to catch the price rise, and now you want to prioritize a player like that's doubling in 25. So information is king at the moment, but I'd also watch, be careful about kind of player value. So players like Isak, for instance, right? He's been an absolute sensation, but I've seen a lot of people say, oh, when Watkins has his double in 25, we're going to just do Isak to Watkins. Easy money. It's not easy, because we know that the kind of value is stored up in players like Isak. It depends obviously when you bought him, but for me at least, I think he's like, he's 9.5 now. I bought him when he was 8.9 million. So that's 0.6 built up in him. That is going to be massive when it comes to number one, assistant manager, and number two, when I decide, I need to get Isak back, because it turns out Newcastle, they haven't actually, got a blank in 29. He's going to be essential for 29. That sort of kind of 50-50 call is always important. So I just think thinking about your transfers before you make them, especially when it comes to kind of how much value you've got tied up in players, is really important. It's tempting to go for the doubles, but we just got to think about the players that are still great in single game weeks as well.
Yeah, no, very, very good points there. And I think another thing to remember is don't worry about it too much with how your players perform in the first one of the double, because you do have 11 days before they play the second time. So it's going to be a long old wait. There's going to be anxious people throughout the break. And it is also worth remembering that the next game week after this is a long way away. Yeah. So there is cup competition in there. There will be injuries.
The thing I'm dreading, Kieran, is that famous double game week for Liverpool, that Salah Mane double game week, where Salah gets injured in the game against Tottenham, and we just think, well, this is just FPL. But there's always that chance, and we have to kind of take that risk sometimes. But it would be annoying, wouldn't it? Because there's that gap between the games. There's obviously, you would expect him to get no minutes in the Plymouth match, but you just never know, do you?
You wouldn't know anything in that. And look, despite owning 3 Liverpool attackers, as an Arsenal fan, I'll be okay with it. I'll take it. I'll allow it. Allow it. That's where the bias will definitely come in. Look, we've lost our star boy. for a while. So I think it's only fair if they do too, so we can just see how it continues. There's something I was saying actually as one of the points, and I don't know if you heard me discuss it, but I'm keen to get anyone's input on this. And something I heard from it was on something James Lawrence Alcott was discussing.
Yeah.
And they started saying about how you can look at as a football team as a bike. Now, bikes need two essential things in order to go, right? To move forward. And that's a front wheel and a rear wheel.
Yeah.
So you can look at certain teams in the Premier League and you can identify who those are. So for Arsenal, that rear wheel is Saliba. And that front wheel is Odegaard, right? Where you can see last season when Arsenal were without Saliba, defence fell apart. They didn't have that sort of rock at the back there. And without that front wheel, they didn't have that creativity we saw this season where it was very limited to set pieces or over-reliance on Saka.
Yeah.
And then you need your gears. So once you're going, your gears help you really go. And for Arsenal, those gears are Saka.
Yeah.
Now, Saka can really go, provided Odegaard is there and Saliba's there so that the bike's moving forward. But you lose one of them and your gears aren't that useful because you're on one wheel going really, really, really fast.
Yeah.
And that's not good if it's your rear wheel and it's not good if it's your front wheel that you're going fast on. And you can look at certain teams and like Man United, you might struggle to find who those wheels are.
Yeah.
Liverpool, you can probably see it a little bit more where arguably Gravenberch has become one of those wheels for them.
Yeah, 100%.
And then you start going like, well, is Salah the gears? Is Trent the gears? Is Van Dijk a wheel? Who are those? But they're a team that do have multiple in each of those locations, which I think is why you do look at a team like Liverpool going, they could lose a gear or a wheel and actually still be fine. And that is just credit to the team they've assembled.
And meanwhile, Southampton have still got stabilisers on, haven't they, really?
Yeah, and Spurs are a sledge.
Yeah.
They go really, really, really fast downhill. So when they're up against easy opposition, they can go really, really, really quick because they don't have any wheels. But when they're up against tough opposition, they're like, wait, what do we do? How do we go up this hill? And look, similarly, City, there's no question about who City's rear wheel is, right? In Rodri.
Yeah.
You lose Rodri, you can't go forwards.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? You'll wobble across the road. You might get to your end destination, but you're not going in a straight line anymore.
Yeah, you're going a roundabout way. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's just an analogy I really like because it does help you then just sort of sit and look at certain teams. And it's questions about essential players, but I was saying with some of my friends who are Arsenal fans, in terms of the team moving forward, Odegaard and Saliba are more essential than Saka is. Saka helps that glamour and secure it, but you're not going to be in a position to secure it without those two being in place.
Definitely, 100%.
Cool, perfect. Well, look, that was my final thoughts, Roberto. Obviously, it's just been a little bit over an hour here, so thank you again for joining me. And another shout out for the Form is Temporary podcast. I'm sure anyone who listens to us definitely listens to you. If not, they should do. You have... Well, this year, your guests have been getting better and better and better each week. And then you had Fella back for a second time. And yeah, I know the charity one. And also, he's good at quizzes. So that probably wasn't good for Chris.
That was
maybe that's why you did it, to humble him a little bit, because he wins every other one.
Stay humble. No, it's been really good fun. Thank you for the shout out, Kieran. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we're really enjoying it because it's been a really good kind of couple of seasons. We are unfortunately going to be. This is going to be our last season for a little bit at least, just because we're obviously when we're finishing uni and graduating, we're then going to be sort of job searching, and it'll be a bit sort of hectic. We'll probably come back at some point, but we don't know when that will be. But no, we're really enjoying every moment, really did enjoy the last one. We've got Hindu Monkey coming on our next one, which will be really good fun. So yeah, we'll be looking ahead to. He
has incredible film taste as well. So, if you get the opportunity, talk to him about films. I'm in a group with him and he's always sharing knowledge on that. In fact, look, Roberto, I've got a quiz question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if you can get this. When did Tottenham become a London club?
So what year?
Yeah.
I will go for 1925.
No, it was 1965. Most people don't know this, but Tottenham were in Middlesex and still are in Middlesex. And Middlesex, until 1965, when the Ordnance Survey was done, was not part of London. So they only became a London club in 1965. So just a nice bit of fact. No intention, no comments around that. But, nice little...
At this point,
quiz.
like, Tottenham might as well be kicked out of the North London derby then, surely.
Well, look, let's be honest. It's Middlesex versus South London, so it's but there is no other competition in North London. So everyone's like, do you know what? Fine, you are the North London derby. But
enough.
in reality, look, both teams are North London clubs because if you exist there now and you have done for a while, yeah, it counts. I get it in the first couple of years for both of those teams, but banter aside, it's a fun rivalry. It's like having that younger brother that you just lock in a cupboard and occasionally have a little think they're on top and go, look, come on, all right, I'll try now. Shh, go back over there. But I had to do that. Shane knows that I've got to get a bit of Spurs slander in from time to time. It's weird. I claim they're not that big a rival, but I always have to make a comment over them. So maybe not a rival, maybe more of an obsession.
Yeah.
Guilty pleasure.
Spurs are bad, but it could be worse. You could be in the bottom 3 of the Championship. And so, yeah, I don't envy them lot down the M1. It's a bit of a shocker for them.
Yeah, that's also true. And actually, I haven't asked you, how's Watford getting on this season?
Oh, how is Watford getting on this season? I mean, it's every season. It's a drama. There's never a dull moment being a Watford fan. And yeah, the last few weeks have been turbulent. I'll put it that way. We've made very few signings. We have had rumours of a new manager coming in, despite cleverly literally performing miracles at that club. We were kind of rumoured to be in the sort of relegation troubles at the start of the season, and we've somehow managed to kind of fluke our way to be a sort of 2 points outside the playoffs. And yeah, it's been more of the same, discontent towards the owners, Pozzos. It's not been very pretty, but yet we're kind of just struggling our way through and getting through with a young squad. And so, yeah, the last few weeks have been bad, but Tom Cleverley is the answer. He's been absolutely fantastic. And now we're just hoping for some last minute transfers. We've made a couple, one being from Udinese, which is our parent club, which doesn't really count. But we also have got over the line a goalkeeper, which is a massive relief considering how Bachmann has played this season. It's not exactly been his finest hour. But yeah, we're hoping to get some more over the line. We've been linked with a few strikers, the likes of Iheanacho. But the problem is that as much as Gino Pozzo assures us he's not going to just sack our manager again after the speculation, there's all words and not much actions to prove it with him getting no backing in the window. So let's hope for some signings before the kind of window shuts on February 3rd. But yeah, it's going to be another kind of long season, I think. And we'll have to see where we are come May. But I'm not feeling too confident of us getting in the playoffs.
Well, it'd be good if you can get there and get back up into the Prem. And, look, it could be worse. You could be Luton, who look like they're going down again. The one that I find interesting is, the one that's made me really pay attention as to how congested the Championship is this year and those playoff spots is QPR's rise from the bottom to be challenging for playoff spots here, but not really by setting the world on fire. Yes, they went unbeaten, but it is like just a couple of points away from here and there. So I am looking forward to hopefully seeing a few old faces in the Premier League next year. Maybe one of you guys can come up alongside the teams that are looking particularly strong. Anyway, look, we've diverted away from everything here. I'll let you go, Roberto, and enjoy your evening. And to everyone who's listening back, thanks a lot, and hope the game week goes well for you. And
yeah, just shout out to you guys. Double Pivot, you deserve a lot more followers than you get, and a lot more likes and views. So keep on doing what you're doing.
We need to be consistent again first. We both had a few major life things going on, so doing it weekly has been the issue. But I think, once we're back up and running doing that, hopefully we'll get a few more people. But again, thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Roberto, and have a good game week.
Thank you.